Saving your own seeds can have a lot of advantages, but it can also be kind of a daunting and overwhelming task, especially for beginners, but not just for beginners, for even very seasoned gardeners. One of the reasons that's true is because so many of the seeds are pretty difficult to save. At least they are until you kind of get some confidence behind you, some success behind you. One of the reasons that's true is that a lot of the plants that we love the most in gardens are things like biennials, like broccoli, carrots, and beets. So they're not even going to throw seed in the first year. So today here we're talking about the easier kinds of seeds to save, and I would not count those in that list for that reason that they're biennial. So you have to either be able to overwinter them in your garden, and if you live in a colder location, they may not overwinter. You may have to actually dig them, stick them in your basement, have them go dormant, plant them again in the spring, let them flower out in the spring and the next summer, and then you get to save the seed. That's pretty daunting, pretty overwhelming. Other things are not quite so easy, things like cucumbers and squash, because they cross-pollinate really easily. They're largely insect pollinated, and those insects carry the pollen between different varieties, and then different members of the same family, even if you only planted, say, one variety of cucumber or one variety of summer squash, you can still get cross-pollination from other members of the family. So that makes life a little hard there, and the results are pretty unpredictable. But when you get to some of the easier things like lettuce, seed saving becomes really simple. Now, if you've done any gardening at all, it doesn't take you long before you learn that lettuce bolts readily as soon as it starts to get hot. And that's what's happening here. We've had some high heat. My lettuce is bolting. I'm taking a break from my lettuce patch right now because it's hot and a little difficult to grow it right now. In the cooler days, when we get some more cool weather, I'll put in some more. Same for like spinach. Radishes are another one. They bolt really easily in the heat. So these are the types of things that are really easy to save seed from because they almost take care of themselves. They bolt. Pretty soon we're going to get flowers. Right after the flowers, which by the way all the pollinators love, we're going to get some seeds, and then the seeds are just really easy to shake off into a bag or even pull the whole plant, hang it upside down in a cool place, in a dry place, in a bag. And let the seed fall into the paper bag, and then you have your seed saved. Voila. All you have to do is kind of, winnow out some of the extra chaff, or even as long as it's dry, it doesn't usually hurt too much if a little of that gets in your seed envelopes. You put it in an envelope, you keep it in a cool, dry place over winter, labeled with the year and the type, and you plant it next year. And that's all there is to it. So there are several things that actually are easiest to save seed from, and the reason being that they meet the criteria for easy to save seeds. So lettuce is one, radish are one, and radishes and lettuce are bound to be the first seeds you're going to get to save in a given year. Radishes actually will grow an edible pod that looks very similar to an edible pod pea. If you pick that before they are mature and drying down, that's edible, can be eaten fresh, tossed in salads, just eaten like an edible pod pea. You can saute it. Really delicious and milder in flavor than the radishes themselves. But then if you let them stay on there and become mature, then they will dry down and you will have radish seeds to plant. Some of the other ones, so annual is the first criteria for an easy saving seed. Open pollinated, which that depends on the seed that you buy and you start with, so you want to make sure you're starting with open pollinated varieties. But then self-pollinating is the other major criteria for what makes a seed easy to save. And the reason for that is that you can be reasonably assured that that plant is going to pollinate from other flowers on its own plant, and then that means you don't have to worry about that cross-pollination coming up with either low productive plants that reverted back to a hybrid parent, or to some weird entirely other vegetable that isn't really very good for eating. So of our easiest seeds for saving, we had our lettuce. We talked about radishes. Beans are another good one. And all you're doing, you want to keep in mind that you're not picking these at the stage where you want to eat them. In other words, these beans are perfect for picking for eating right now, but they're still too young for picking for seed saving. We're going to let them get big, what you would think of as overgrown, over mature, something you would throw out and not eat. You want to let it go even beyond that and then dry down. And then you've got your seeds for saving. They'll dry right on the bush, or again, if it's getting into fall or something and you don't, or you're having a wet year and having a hard time drying them down, once they're mature, you can pull that plant and hang them upside down, let them finish inside. So lettuce, radish, beans are our top, are three of our tops. And then the others are some other fan favorites are peas. And peas, same deal as with the beans. You're going to let them get overly mature beyond where you would want to be eating them, even beyond something like this. You want to let them get really kind of bumpy and yellow and overly mature, and then let them dry to a point where they're not something that you would just pick and eat fresh, but dried down, then they're great for saving for pea seeds. And peas are another one that tend to self-pollinate. Usually not too many surprises there. Tomatoes are also self-pollinating. If you have a good open pollinated variety, go ahead and select. You're going to wait till they get nice and ripe and juicy, not rotten, but when they're almost overripe, that's the best time to pick a few of your best tomatoes from your best performing bushes and save those. And then the others are peppers. Similar to tomatoes, peppers are really easy to save the seed from. You're just going to cut it in half, scrape out the seeds, let them dry on something like a glass plate or something they won't stick to for a few days, and voila, you have next year's peppers. Now, before we totally wrap it up, I want to go back to the idea of things like radishes and lettuce and other greens like spinach. If the plant itself is something that is edible, consider saving those seeds not only for growing for next year, but for using for like microgreens and micro growing. Or in the case of peas, you can grow them to a pea shoot. Sunflowers, the same thing. And the big advantage of saving your own seed for things like that is that those are things that are really seed intensive, and it gets really expensive to grow them, but they're easy to grow, don't have a lot of requirements indoors, say over the winter. But it's just that they get expensive because of the seed cost. So if you can save your own cost, you can save yourself a lot of money and grow all those microgreens. So I hope this helps. I hope it encourages you to find some confidence in seed saving. Start out with these 6 simple ones and then move on from there once you feel like you have a firm grasp on the situation under you.